If you've ever looked at tarot cards and thought, okay, but how am I supposed to know what this actually means? Then this lesson is for you. Because one of the biggest misconceptions when learning tarot is that every card has a meaning that you simply need to memorize. The Three of Swords means heartbreak. The Empress means abundance. And the Eight of Pentacles means hard work. Those meanings aren't necessarily wrong, but the question I want you to start asking is why? Why does this card mean that? Because once you understand where the tarot meanings come from, you don't have to depend so heavily on memorization. You can actually begin to read the card. Welcome to lesson 2 of Tarot Understood. Today we're breaking a tarot card down into 6 layers: the archetype, the number, the suit, the element, the imagery, and the context. And once you learn to see those layers, tarot starts making a whole lot more sense. I want you to think about a tarot card almost like a sentence. A sentence gets its meaning from multiple pieces working together. And tarot works similarly. So when you pull a card, you aren't just looking at the Five of Cups, you're looking at a 5, and you're looking at cups. Cups belong to the element of water, and then there's the imagery, and finally there's the context in which the card appears. All of those pieces contribute to the information, and with the major arcana, we also have larger archetypal experiences at the center of the card. So rather than asking, hey, what does this card mean? I want you to eventually start asking, what are all of these pieces telling me? That small change is the beginning of reading instead of memorizing. Let's start with the archetype. This is especially important in the major arcana. The major arcana represents larger human experiences and patterns that we recognize across different lives and circumstances. Think about the Fool. You can memorize new beginnings, spontaneity, taking a leap of faith, but underneath those keywords is something much bigger. The Fool represents the archetype of the beginning. We all have been the Fool. Anytime you step into something new without knowing exactly where it will lead you, you're experiencing that archetype. Now suddenly, new beginnings isn't just a key word, and you understand why the card carries this meaning. And the same thing happens with the Hermit. Traditionally, we associate the Hermit with introspection, solitude, wisdom, and inner guidance. But look at the archetype underneath it. The search for wisdom within. Now imagine the Hermit appearing in a career reading versus in a relationship reading. The archetype stays recognizable, but its expression can change. And that brings us to something incredibly important. A card has structure, but the interpretation has movement. Next, look at the number. Numbers help us tell what the energy is doing. Instead of memorizing every numbered card independently, you can learn the general movement of the numbers. For example, aces begin, 2s divide, they compare or balance, 3s develop, 4s stabilize, 5s disrupt, 6s adjust or restore, 7s test, 8s move, organize, or strengthen, 9s approach accumulation, and 10s complete the transition. These aren't rigid definitions, they're patterns. So imagine pulling a 5. Before you even know the suit, you already have a clue. Something is being disrupted, challenged, or changed. Then the suit tells us where, which brings us to the next layer. The 4 suits gives us 4 different areas of human experience. The easiest blush rose framework to remember is Wands inspire, Cups connect, Swords clarify, Pentacles build. Wands deal with passion, drive, creativity, action, and desire. Cups deal with emotion, relationships, connection, and intuition. Swords deal with the thoughts, communication, truth, decisions, and conflict. And Pentacles deal with the physical world. So think work, money, resources, health, stability, and what we build over time. Now let's combine the number and the suit. We're going to come back to the 5 of Cups. The 5 introduces disruption. The Cups bring that disruption into the emotional realm. So before we've even looked at the traditional meaning or the picture, we can reason towards emotional disruption. Loss and regret, disappointment, grief. Now the traditional meaning, it's making sense because you didn't have to start with the keyword. You arrived at it. And that's exactly what I want you to learn to do. Now the suits, they also correspond with the 4 classical elements. So the Wands are fire, the Cups are water, the Swords are air, and Pentacles, earth. The elements give the suit another layer of personality. So fire wants to move, water wants to feel and connect, Air wants to think, communicate, and understand, and Earth wants to create something tangible and lasting. This becomes especially helpful when you have multiple cards in a reading. Okay, so let's say you pull these cards. If almost every card is cups, for example, you're not just seeing several individual cards, you're seeing water dominate the reading. Emotion, intuition, or relationships may be carrying more weight than logic or practicality. And sometimes what's missing is just as interesting. So a reading filled with cups and wands but no pentacles might have plenty of emotion and desire, but very little grounding. Now we're no longer reading cards individually, we're beginning to recognize the language. Okay, now we're getting to one of my favorite layers, and that is the imagery. Especially if you're learning with the Rider-Waite-Smith, the images are not simply decoration, they help tell the story. So I'm coming back to the Five of Cups. And this figure is focused solely on spilling the cups, but there are still upright cups behind them. So the visual details matter. It tells us something that the word grief alone cannot. There has been loss. The loss deserves acknowledgement. But the entire emotional landscape has not disappeared. Something still remains. Now imagine you don't remember a single key word for the Five of Cups. You can still look at the imagery and ask, what is happening? What is the figure looking at? What are they ignoring? What has been lost? What's remaining? Those questions begin creating an interpretation, and this is why imagery is such an important bridge between the traditional tarot knowledge and intuition. Your intuition isn't replacing the structure, it is responding to it. And finally, we have context. So this may be the layer that changes the reading the most, because tarot cards do not appear in a vacuum. Ask yourself, what is the question? What position is the card in? What cards are surrounding it? What story is developing? Imagine pulling the Two of Cups. In a relationship reading, it might describe mutual attraction, emotional reciprocity, or partnership. And in a career reading, the same card could describe collaborations, an agreement, or a productive professional relationship. The symbolism hasn't suddenly changed, the context has. Two still brings two things together. Cups still speak in connection. The image still shows exchange and reciprocity, but the question, that tells us where the symbolism belongs. That's why memorizing the Two of Cups equals soulmate can become so limiting. The card is much more flexible than the keyword. Okay, let's take one card and walk through the process. Imagine we pull the Three of Pentacles in a career reading. Instead of immediately reaching for a memorized definition, we build it. Archetypal idea, creation through contribution and skill. Number 3, develops and creates. The suit is Pentacles, it builds something tangible. Element is Earth, that wants practical, real-world results. And then the imagery in the Rider-Waite-Smith card, multiple people are involved in creating something, and different roles or expertise are represented. So the context, we asked about careers. So if you put everything together, what do we get? Development through collaboration. Your skills contributing to something larger, learning from other people, being recognized for what you bring to work, building something through shared experiences. Okay, so then now compare that with simply memorizing Three of Pentacles is teamwork. Teamwork isn't working. But look how much more you can actually read when you understand why the card means what it means. The next time you pull a tarot card, don't immediately look up the meaning. Give yourself a minute first and ask, what larger idea or archetypes do I see? What is the number doing? What area of life does the suit describe? What does the element add? What happens to the imagery? And how does all of this relate to the question that I asked? Then look at the traditional meaning. You might be surprised by how close you already are. And more importantly, you'll start understanding why the traditional meaning developed in the first place. Because the goal isn't to never learn the traditional tarot meanings. Traditional meaning gives us a shared language and the history of tarot. The goal is to stop treating those meanings like 78 disconnected definitions, because tarot has structure. And when you understand that structure, you have something to come back to when your mind goes blank. Archetype, number, suit, element, imagery, context. Learn to see the layers and the meaning starts to make sense. That's the difference between memorizing a card and learning how to read one. In the next lesson, we're zooming out from the individual cards to look at the two worlds of tarot, the major and the minor arcana, and how they work together as two layers of the same story. Until then, stop memorizing, start reading.